Welcome back to the Bitcoin Zodiac. I hope that you're all doing well. It's been a minute since I've been on here. I am traveling at the moment, and last episode, or when I would have filmed the last episode, um, for the new moon, I was actually really, really sick. I had terrible food poisoning. I've never had food poisoning like that before in my life. I thought I might die for a minute there, but I didn't. I survived and I'm here. So I'm here with you. And also, one thing I want to note is that big things always happen when I'm traveling for Bitcoin. They always happen. I think when we cracked like 100K. I was in the south of France, and something happened as well when I was like at a music festival in Thailand. Can't remember. I think it was another all-time high, something like that. And so these kind of crazy things always happen when I'm away. And obviously, this episode of The Real Politicians of Washington, D.C. is filled with a lot of drama. Like it's a lot, guys. And obviously affecting financial markets in varying different ways. But I'm going to go through the astrology, and before I take my makeup off and get into bed, I'm just sitting here with in my PJs having a chat with you. I'm going to try and keep the laptop as still as possible so that I don't drive you all crazy, but apologies. I'm obviously not my usual setup to be recording, so apologies for the poor production quality. But we will get through. So let's take a look at the astrology coming up. We have this full moon coming up in Libra, and it's actually a full pink moon. So this moon really does illuminate themes of balance, justice, beauty, and harmony in relationships. Um, since Libra is a cardinal air sign ruled by Venus, it also brings emotional clarity, and urges us to release codependent patterns in favor of mutual respect and equilibrium. So it calls us to resolve and restore peace where tension or imbalance has lingered. So this isn't our personal life that we're talking about, but we can see this echoed on the world stage as well. And so hopefully our world leaders have as much self-awareness as you do, and they're dialed into the Bitcoin Zodiac so they know what's up. I won't hold my breath on either of those things, but we shall see. This full moon is actually probably going to be pretty emotional because we also have an opposition to Chiron in Aries. So this triggers like emotional wounds related to independence, identity, and self-worth. So this aspect offers like a healing gateway if we're willing to face vulnerability and communicate our needs authentically. This opposition really pushes us to address and heal the divide between self and other. So again, another theme you can see playing out on the world stage. We also have this full moon square Mars in Cancer. So it creates this emotional tension and potential conflict between the desire for peace and the instinct to protect or defend. So it may stir reactive energy, but it also fuels the courage to take action on what really, really matters. So this square really challenges us to respond with emotional maturity, recognizing conflict as a sacred teacher. So again, hoping our world leaders can dial into some of that self-awareness, but only time will tell with that. Now, we also have Venus stationing direct, ending this Venus retrograde. So after a reflective retrograde with some deep inner review of love, values, and self-worth, Venus moving direct softens the heart. So we're now integrating lessons around unconditional love, spiritual connection, and emotional healing in matters of the heart. So that's really the, an overview of this full moon from a personal astrology perspective. And obviously we've had a ton of stuff going on in the macro world and the macro markets and those sorts of things. And that's just been really crazy. But it is moments like this, like obviously, like I host a podcast called the Bitcoin Zodiac. I'm a Bitcoin permabull, not just from like a trading and investment perspective, but from a technology perspective, from a systemic perspective, from a philosophical and moral perspective. I obviously see a huge trajectory for Bitcoin in adoption and in value. But I also am an astrologer, and I recognize that everything is cyclical, and so is Bitcoin. And we recognize that, and that's kind of what we're doing here, is we're aligning to the Bitcoin cycle. So there are times when these sort of big events happen in the markets that sort of caused me to take a second look and just check, I'm human, I have biases, and I'm, biased, bullish towards Bitcoin. And in the last episode, we talked about this sort of astrological cycle, but actually has really been adopted as the 18.6-year property cycle in the US. Or more accurately, it's the 18.6-year land value cycle. But and that was sort of why, I had this broader perspective of another leg up for Bitcoin during this cycle. And so when these kind of events where we see a big downturn, when we see, things in the traditional markets like literally breaking, bond yields moving like that, I mean, it's just unheard of. And even like yesterday, I think the Dixie moved 2.5% in a day. So, this is crazy. So I always want to be making sure that I'm keeping things in perspective. I'm not being delusional. And I'm not missing things or overlooking things that I just don't want to see. So I'm going to take you through the charts that I've been looking at. I still think we have another leg up for Bitcoin during this cycle, and I'm going to show you why. And I'm just going to share with you my thought process and, see if you agree with it. And if you do, great. If you don't, that's okay too. But basically what we're looking at right now is the Bitcoin perpetual contract 1 month on the Bybit exchange. And so this is a really zoomed out perspective. I want to have a look on the higher time frames of where we're at in the cycle. So here we have our reversal and our first like move up in this cycle. And then we have some consolidation and we have that next move up. So we've had 2 levels. And we generally get 3 levels and possibly sometimes an extension as well, but you don't usually see an extension on the monthly time frame. And these levels aren't guaranteed, but they just give us a good guide. We're never working in certainties, we're working in probabilities, and more often than not these levels do play out, these moves do play out, these waves do play out. And so as you can see, we've had a move down here, which I'm looking at as another, retracement on this monthly time frame before we make our way into this final move up in this cycle. So that's what I'm looking at on the monthly. Now, we're basically, when I'm looking at the charts to try and remain objective and keep my emotions and my biases out of these situations, I'm really building a bull case and a bear case. So really like, what are the boxes on either side? And when we drop down to the weekly chart, we can see the levels as we move up. So we've got rise level 1 here, rise level 2 here, and then rise level 3. We do have this kind of like reversal here as well. And then I think we have drop level 1. And so really in a retracement, we would expect to see 2 drop levels and 3 rise levels if we're in a bullish market. So that's what I'm looking at. There are a couple of things that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. Like I see this movement and this lower high that we've printed here. Don't love it. That's a tick in the box for the bearish scenario. But as I said, it does fit into our macro view or our broader view where we could be having, this is probably a retracement forming on the monthly time frame before we move out of here into this next level. I do want to see us hold this 50 EMA. If we do drop that, that is also another tick in the column of the bull, of the bear perspective. But we seem to be holding it. Obviously, we wicked below it earlier this week, and we shall see where we close. We've got 2 days and 8 hours left in this candle, so we will see if we manage to hold that. So again, that's an important level. And yeah, we want to see that we're holding that and we reverse from there. Now, what I'm looking at in terms of reversals to get us into that next leg up in the bull market is, let's move over to my astro chart. Let me see that. So on the daily time frame, as you can see on here, this is what the chart that I mark all my levels. Someone did ask me last time I shared my screen why I'm on the Bitstamp chart. And the reason is because on this chart, I actually do a lot of the back testing. So I want as much information as far back as possible from, in Bitcoin's, inception. And like the Bybit chart just doesn't have that information, just doesn't go back as far as that. I don't even think Bybit existed back then. So we want to have as much when we're back testing, especially some of the longer movements of these planets. You need to have much more information than the Bybit chart is going to give you. I never actually trade off the Bitstamp chart, but this is just to give me that information and make it easiest to backtest on. So I hope that makes sense. So what I'm really looking for is I'm looking for a reversal out of this. And so we have some liquidation levels that are sitting. These are actually 3-month liquidation levels, but they're also overlap with 1-month liquidation levels. And that is from a range, pretty big level, to be honest. Like there's a lot of money sitting there. And I'm quite shocked that they sort of only dipped into this the last week when it came down, or the last couple of days when it came down here. But we still have this sitting here at between 74,600 and 74,350. So this is like a really keen area that I would expect them to come back and take, to be very honest. But we shall see. We'll see what the coming weeks bring us. I'll give you some clues in the astrology shortly. And so really what I'm looking for is a very convincing bounce out of probably this area, and to then take us into the next phase out of this consolidation retracement period on the monthly time frame and up into this next, creating this next level, this next wave of the bull run. So I will let you know, not to just freak you out, but I will let you know there are also some levels beneath that. If we do drop these levels and we don't see a strong reversal, like when I say a strong reversal, I mean like we're not just coming down and trundling down and then maybe a little bit of a movement back up. No, like we want to see a quite a strong reaction out of this zone, and then breaking some key levels, reclaiming this 50 and 200 EMA, and breaking and retesting those. So to really be convincing that we're moving into that next phase of the bull run, right? So if we do drop these levels and we just trundle down, then I will expect the reversal. The next area for reversal will be down here, between 66,200 and 67,900. Now, if we do come down here, this will create some bearish market structure that will, again, we'll have to have a look at and see where it places us, you know, to be able to decide if we're still bullish or if that thesis has been broken. So that's the way that I'm looking at it. It's not broken as yet. It is not being that, it's not that comfortable. Like, I don't love it. But just to put it in perspective, a broader perspective, the 50% level of this move is at the, I think it's 62,500. So this would still technically be, you know, in a bull market, even if it came back to there. But I think anything below that is, personally, we would really struggle to come back from, because as I said, if we come down that low, we will be creating so much bearish market structure. It will be really hard to convince me that we're still in a bull market. So we're not there yet, and I don't want to sound all doom and gloom, because I really am still bullish, even for this cycle. I still feel like we are in a retracement and an accumulation phase. I still think the market maker is fucking with us. And, you know, I am looking for that reversal to bring us into that next phase, that final phase of this bull run, this cycle. So that's what I'm looking at on the charts. Let's get into some of this astrology that I've got marked up through here and see where that could take us. So coming into this weekend, we actually have quite a positive aspect. On the 12th of April, we have a Chiron Cazimi in Aries. So Chiron, known as the wounded healer, if you've been on my channel for a while, you've heard me talk about it. It's one of my favorite planets. It represents deep emotional and spiritual wounds, especially those that transform into sources of wisdom and strength. So I love it, not just because I love what it represents, but it also really does have quite an impact on Bitcoin. Bitcoin really responds well to it, because I guess because Bitcoin is always, I don't know, building on past woundings, I guess. You know, it's always proving people wrong. And it always brings me back to that that anti-fragile aspect that Talib talks about. And, you know, and I just think that that's the essence of Chiron as well. And so it does really respond to Chiron, Bitcoin does. And so that's why I find it really interesting. So a Cazimi occurs when the planet or a body like Chiron is within 1 degree of the sun. So it's sitting in the heart of it. So this is a moment of purification, amplification, and divine insight. So the Chiron Cazimi is rare and very, very powerful. And in Aries, it really highlights healing through bold action, reclaiming identity, and self-leadership. So Aries is ruled by Mars and governs pioneering, risk-taking, and self-sovereignty. So this transit actually marks a collective breakthrough around wounded independence, especially in relation to how we lead, how we take risks, and how we assert ourselves, especially in financially. So again, we can sort of see this being reflected in the kind of like macro environment that we're in at the moment with Trump's trade war. Are we calling it that? I think we can call it that. Yeah. And so that's where we're going. So really the themes of this transit is about healing financial trauma. So collective and individual wounds around financial independence, self-worth, and past mistakes could surface and could come up during this time, but with the potential for deep healing and transformation. So this is really called to, reclaim sovereignty. So in Aries, this Cazimi encourages bold moves towards self-reliant finance. So think Bitcoin, think DeFi, cold storage, and sovereignty, like any kind of tech that aligns with sovereignty. So it's an ideal time to take personal ownership over your financial choices and rebuild trust in your own decision making. So it's also about rewriting the warrior archetype in markets. So Aries governs initiators and fighters, and this Cazimi transforms financial war wounds, hearing that word a lot, into wisdom. So expect narratives around reliance, survival, and pioneering like financial reform to dominate. So this is so aligned with Bitcoin, like it's not funny, because Bitcoin is a symbol of financial independence and rebellion against centralized control. It's very deeply aligned with Aries themes. So this Cazimi could bring like a healing narrative around Bitcoin's past wounds, like previous crashes, its, renowned volatility, cycles of FUD and, regulatory attacks. It can bring renewed investor confidence in Bitcoin as a tool of self-sovereignty and a price reaction that's fueled by emotional and ideological shifts rather than just pure fundamentals. So just be a little bit careful and keep that in mind. But when we talk about this, like renewed confidence in Bitcoin as a tool for self-sovereignty, I think that it's sort of this idea, and I've spoken about this in previous episodes, that it's not just like Bitcoin itself is growing and strengthening, and like all of that is happening for sure, but also the backdrop that it's happening in is declining, right? So trust in the traditional financial system is declining, belief in the traditional financial system is declining, the financial system even working and doing what it needs to do, that's not happening in the way that it used to, right? So, and that in turn just elevates Bitcoin in a way that it suddenly makes Bitcoin look less scary or less risky. And so that is also helping to strengthen and propel Bitcoin adoption. So the Chiron Cazimi in Aries is a powerful moment for financial healing, rebirth, and renewed courage. So for Bitcoin, this transit echoes its original purpose, a financial system born from crisis, designed to empower the individual. So this is a time to embrace your financial wounds, learn from them, and move forward with strength, clarity, and sovereignty. So those who do the inner work may find like this to be a turning point, and like not just in wealth either, but also in self-trust and the belief that you can trust yourselves, you can trust your decision-making ability, you can trust yourself to be able to provide for yourself, to support yourself, to be safe. And that's a really important like lesson to learn and to build on. Okay, so then we have our full moon, our pink full moon in Libra. Like every full moon is a culmination point where something hidden is illuminated. So it's always a moment of like heightened emotion, market reactions, and often price reversals or volatility. So this particular full moon occurs in Libra. As I said before, it's a cardinal air sign ruled by Venus. And in financial astrology, it's associated with currency's value, beauty, luxury goods, balance, and diplomacy. So Libra is very other orientated. So it focuses on partnerships, contracts, equilibrium, and making it especially relevant to trade agreements. Hello. Negotiations and monetary policies. Like it's no coincidence that all of these tariffs and negotiations are happening at this time. Like this is exactly the time for it. So Venus rules money, especially the perceived value of things. So Libra's airy and diplomatic nature ties closely to market sentiment and the value like that investors place on assets, including Bitcoin, including altcoins as well. So when Venus is strong, as it is now, there's typically like a return of optimism, flow, and liquidity. Hello, Jerome Powell, are you hearing? Let's get some liquidity flowing, especially in creative or speculative markets like Bitcoin. So Bitcoin markets often respond to full moons with short-term volatility. It is a time that it's generally, emotional. Like everybody is emotional. It's an emotional time, so expect that. And it can be quite volatile. But it usually prints a local bottom. So we could see that like bottoming out in the area that I pointed out to you. We could see quite a strong reversal on the other side of this full moon. So let's see. Let's go through the aspects and see if that is likely or if we can see it a little later on in this cycle. So because it's a cardinal full moon, it does also usually signal a trend change. So especially around key Libra themes like valuation, fairness, and regulations. So that's also it's something interesting to just keep in the back of your mind. So key aspects as well for this full moon, obviously it's a full moon, so it's opposing the sun. So we get this kind of like emotional climax and overreactions in the markets. So many people act impulsively, making it a time to like really observe and not react. We also have the moon opposite Chiron in Aries, which reveals market wounds around risk-taking and self-sovereignty. So for Bitcoin, this may bring collective anxiety around security, identity, and the self-custody narrative. We also have the moon square Mars in Cancer, which is a tense, emotionally reactive placement, defensive, or like fear-based trading could spike. So just be cautious of like emotional decision making or news-driven reactions. Like really create your own plan and stick to it. Like what do you want to see that will give you an indication that that's a reversal? And have a plan and stick to it so that you don't get tied into the hype and the headlines and the emotions of everything, right? Expect heightened volatility, especially in sectors ruled by Venus. So Bitcoin, crypto in general, luxury goods, currencies, and something I haven't really heard much about this cycle is probably going to start to come back up into the forefront, and that is really art markets and NFTs. So that could also present during this time. So traders should be alert for reversal signals, particularly in Bitcoin and other speculative assets. So with Libra's focus on balance and contracts, there could be a lot of news about regulation, around tariffs, around agreements with countries coming to the US, legal rulings, policy shifts, all of those kind of things that may impact Bitcoin and the banking sectors. So this full moon is a really powerful reminder that equilibrium is key, both emotionally and financially. So in markets, this translates to maintaining a well-balanced portfolio, not chasing hype, and just remaining emotionally detached from the volatility. So this with Venus direct and the Libra moon shining a light on value, connection, and fairness, it's just a perfect time to like align your investments also with deeper values rather than just short-term gains. So keep that in mind because that is a little bit of a theme all the way through this video. So our next aspect that I wanted to talk about is actually a transit that happened on the 30th of March, but I'm going to bring it up because it's really important, I think, to Bitcoin. And that is Neptune moving into Aries. So it's the new financial dream begins. So I've spoken before on this site that it's like, what is real anyway? Like what everything is just a story, realistically. And I've spoken about our current financial system being really propped up and held together only by the fact that we believe in it. Like really, it's just an idea. And, it's a very, very powerful, strong idea because so many people align to it, buy into it, believe in it, live by it. And that is what gives it its strength. And really everything is, right? It's really everything, the way that we do government, the way that we do money, they're just ideas that people got behind. And so allow yourself as we move into this new transit to imagine like what it might be like if we got behind a new idea. So give yourself the space to sort of think about that. Really, Neptune is the planet of dreams, of illusions, of idealism, of imagination and collective consciousness. So it rules both deception and spiritual vision. So often blurring the lines between what is real and what is fantasy. So Aries is a cardinal fire sign ruled by Mars, associated with initiative, leadership, individualism, action, and boldness. So when Neptune entered Aries on the 30th of March, this is the first time Neptune has been in Aries for 150 years. So this it will retrograde back into Pisces in October 22nd, and then move back into Aries, beginning this new 14-year period in Aries. And this has not occurred since the 1860s, which was a huge time of war, innovation, and massive societal shifts. So put what you see in the news into those kind of contexts as well. I often wonder, when Trump and his team are making all these decisions and making very drastic sort of, negotiations with other countries, I often wonder if they understand like the bigger part that they're playing. Like they obviously have a purpose in mind, but their actions are always used to contribute to the greater good. And whether they're good or bad actions, they're always part of divine timing. Like all of us, all of our actions fit in that way. And we are in the midst of a massive up level of humanity and an up level of the way that we do life, the way that we live, the way that we do everything, actually. And so I always just wonder if, our politicians are even conscious of this bigger movement that is at play, or if they're just like so focused on their like role in it, in that moment. But it's super interesting. So Neptune moving into Aries marks the birth of new collective financial ideals, particularly around decentralization, digital sovereignty, and self-directed economies. So we can expect the rise of, again, the rise of the digital warrior archetype. So expect a surge in individual-led financial movements, like Bitcoin, like DeFi, like peer-to-peer finance. And people are more likely to reject central authority in favor of self-custody and financial independence. So we also need to be really aware of illusion versus inspiration. So Neptune's fog can definitely lead to hype cycles, over-idealization, and bubbles, especially in emerging technologies, AI, metaverse assets, altcoins, and things like that. So we must really be able to distinguish between visionary projects and pump and dump schemes. I'm hoping we're going to see a bit less of that. That's going to be filtered out. But I think that they also have their role, because I think that they just have to come and play out until people become so immune to them that they don't fall for them anymore and they don't see any value in them anymore. But we're also going to be crossing new financial frontiers. Like Aries initiates, like expect the rise of new asset classes, digital currencies, tokenization of everything, basically. So massive energy will be poured into digital pioneering, especially from younger generations. Bitcoin is also a symbol of sovereignty and digital rebellion. It's directly aligned with Aries themes. So expect increased ideological fervor in the Bitcoin community. Expect a shift from institutional dominance back to grassroots adoption and sort of more decentralized control. Like we've really seen that in the last, especially this cycle, it's been all about the institutions. But we're going to see a shift back to the grassroots movement that, Bitcoin came out of. And I also really would like to see some decentralization around the custody of institutional Bitcoin holdings as well. Like everything is very centralized at this point in time. So hopefully we will see some shifts in that too. And just expect a lot of narratives around self-sovereignty, financial freedom, borderless identity to really dominate Bitcoin discourse. And I think that that's going to come out of, like, I can see that there are going to be some things in the traditional world that they're going to break and people are going to lose faith in them, in things that we've always believed in. I don't know what they are, and the things that we've always believed in for our entire lives. And that faith and belief that things will always be the way they've been is going to be undermined. And so I think that's what's going to spark conversations around self-sovereignty and financial freedom and things like that. So just be a bit careful and a bit aware that Neptune can also bring delusionment. So expect false messiahs in crypto, figures promising liberation, but completely lacking substance. Regulatory confusion as governments try to fight sort of phantom threats or assert control over decentralized systems. I definitely think there's going to be a movement, especially from the Western countries, in terms of taxation. People are leaving their countries in droves, and they're out of cash, right? So they need to find ways to continue to tax people. So Neptune and Aries, it's the dawn of new financial mythos. So one where the individual becomes the financial hero. So this is really a time to boldly dream, but do so with grounded awareness. For Bitcoin and crypto, this transit could be a renaissance of ideological strength, especially around themes of digital sovereignty, freedom, scarcity, sound money, and innovation. So those who blend vision with vigilance will thrive in this environment. Okay, so next we have Chiron semi-square Bitcoin's natal Mars, and that is on the 14th of February. So this is not particularly positive for Bitcoin. So again, Chiron, the wounded healer, Mars, the planet of action, drive, and aggression, and risk-taking. In financial astrology, it relates to market momentum, investor confidence, and trading activities. So a semi-square is a minor but tense aspect, often showing up as internal friction, subtle stress, or psychological trigger points that lead to like discomfort-driven action. So when transiting Chiron forms a semi-square to Bitcoin's natal Mars, it activates a subconscious wound around aggressive financial behavior, assertiveness, and risk dynamics. So expect a subtle but noticeable undercurrent of tension in the Bitcoin market, because people may feel doubt around taking action, internalized conflict between risk and safety. Again, like I said at the beginning of this episode, even I am sort of going, hey, hang on a second. I need to check that we're still in a bull market. So there's going to be a lot of people that are, thinking in that way. I'm not that original. And so you're going to see that like internal conflict between risk and safety, and a tendency to overreact emotionally or act impulsively out of fear or frustration. So this aspect doesn't scream like crash, but it kind of like whispers, be aware of reactionary trading. And since Mars rules confidence and momentum and Chiron represents wounding, Bitcoin may experience some hesitation in price rallies, react more sensitively to FUD or negative sentiment, and face external pressure, maybe like public narratives, political narratives, regulatory headlines, that weaken sort of that bullish momentum. So I'm thinking we might have quite a positive weekend, and then Monday we're going to maybe face a bit of a slowdown a little bit. And but the timing of this and the like impact scope really is, Chiron semi-square often unfolds subtly, so the effects may feel kind of ambient, like a market mood swing, if you will, or just very odd trading behavior. I'm not seeing like a massive market collapse on Monday. Barring Trump's tweets over the weekend, who knows, anything could happen. But I'm not seeing that in the astrology. So short-term price dips or sluggish behavior could coincide with the aspect's peak, and then followed by a rebound once emotional equilibrium returns. So that's really kind of what we're looking at. So this aspect also prepares the ground for deeper Chiron transits, so to Bitcoin's chart later. So think of this as like a prelude to long-term healing and restructuring. So the Chiron semi-square to Bitcoin's natal Mars is like a soft bruise to Bitcoin's like inner warrior. I'm getting so philosophical and poetic tonight. It's really a time of inner market reflection and not like outward disruption. So it's a powerful period to reassess trading habits, calm reactionary behavior. That's kind of a theme for the next 2 weeks, and focus on healing how and why you engage with the market. So those who pause and reflect and plan will absolutely come out of this transit much stronger, both financially and psychologically. Then on the 20th of April, we have some positivity, and we have Saturn trine Bitcoin's natal sun. So Saturn represents structure, discipline, responsibility, and long-term value. And it's usually associated with governments and institutions and regulations and systems of control. So the sun symbolizes identity, vitality, visibility, and core purpose. In Bitcoin's natal chart, it represents its intrinsic mission. So this decentralized value, sound money, digital scarcity, sovereignty, innovation, and a trustless financial system. So a trine is a harmonious aspect that indicates ease, opportunity, and strong support. So when Saturn trines the sun, it stabilizes and strengthens the identity or core of what it touches. So in Bitcoin's chart, this aspect signals a powerful time of maturity, of like structural validation and long-term credibility. So it really is quite a powerful aspect. And I think it's going to have like far-reaching effects as well. It's not just a short-term positive aspect, right? So we are looking at like potentially institutional support and legitimization. So Saturn represents institutions and regulations. So when it harmonizes with Bitcoin's sun, Bitcoin may experience growing acceptance by the traditional financial systems, banks, asset managers, retirement portfolios, etc. And news around regulatory clarity, government endorsement, structured integration could surface. There's greater momentum for Bitcoin being seen as like a serious asset rather than a speculative toy, which is super interesting. And, you know, a Bitcoin positive tweet from Trump on a Sunday wouldn't go amiss, you know, we wouldn't mind that. But it's really about price stabilization and long-term growth. So this transit really supports stable organic growth rather than just hype-fueled spikes. So as I said, like I'm looking for something that is going to take us into this next cycle, right? So I'm looking at something that has a bit more of a strong foundation behind it than just a quick up move because the dollar dumped, right? So we're wanting to balance that, and I think that this transit is sort of bringing that in. So yeah, so price action may show some sustainable upward trends, especially if paired with favorable macroeconomic factors or tweets from Trump. I'm just kidding with the tweets from Trump. We can do without them. Stronger support levels, less volatility over the long term, and investor confidence from long-term holders. We're also looking at like the maturation of the ecosystem. So this really marks a growth phase for Bitcoin's infrastructure, development of layer 2 solutions, institutional custody platforms, possibly improve security and compliance frameworks, and just growing financial literacy and public understanding of Bitcoin's purpose and core mission. So strengthening of bullish sentiment, especially from serious investors and institutions, reduced volatility with price consolidating above key psychological levels. So again, like I said, you know, maybe reclaiming that 50 EMA and retesting it and flipping that into support. Maybe we want to do that on the daily. And obviously I was saying we want to hold it on the weekly. And also just this momentum for long-term appreciation. So not necessarily explosive, but definitely forceful and dependable. So Bitcoin will begin in future cycles to behave more like a store of value asset akin to gold or bonds, although gold is actually kind of behaving like Bitcoin right now. But under this influence, like appealing to risk-averse investors seeking inflation hedges or diversification. So the Saturn trine to Bitcoin's natal sun is deeply beneficial, growth-orientated transit. Like it really marks a phase of maturity, of credibility, and you know, consolidation of power for Bitcoin. So this is not the time for hype chasing, but it's really for laying foundations, getting really good entries, or adding to your entries for this next leg of the cycle. And yeah, trusting and entering for the long game. And then on April 21st, we have Saturn conjoins the North Node in Pisces. So these are really interesting ones. These are more macro. They're not just specific to Bitcoin. So again, we have Saturn, which is structure, discipline, regulation, responsibility, time, and systems of control. So in financial astrology, Saturn often represents government, institutions, and like long-term frameworks that hold economies together. And then we have the North Node, which is this evolutionary path. So it points to the collective destiny, growth potential, and the future of value creation. It shows where humanity is headed. And when Saturn conjoins the North Node, it signals a fated restructuring moment. So a merging of karmic lessons represented by Saturn, and then with the future direction. So that's the North Node influence. So this union occurs when this union occurs in the sign of Pisces, which is a water sign, sign of disillusion, imagination, spirituality, and decentralization. Pisces really rules like idealism and non-material wealth and borderless systems. So this is kind of like a very intriguing resonance with Bitcoin. Not that Bitcoin, from a price action point of view, is like tends to be that in love with Pisces, but it does have this very interesting sort of correlation and connection with Bitcoin. So we have a karmic crossroads for global institutions. You can expect regulatory pivots and structural reforms in global finance. We're already seeing the stage being set for that, like very clearly. And look, honestly, rather than kind of like arguing back and forth about like, is it a good idea, is it not? I don't really care about that, to be honest, anymore. I think some of the rhetoric around the tariffs and things like that is a bit stupid and a bit disingenuous. Trump kind of paints this picture that America's just so generous and so kind, and everybody's taken advantage of them, and that's why they have to impose these tariffs. But the reality is, for the past several decades, the greatest export of America has been the dollar. It's the global reserve currency, and every country is addicted to the dollar. Every country has been injecting that drug into the veins of its economy. And countries are strung out on the dollar. Countries that have wanted to attempt to reduce their dependence on the dollar. So detox from the dollar a bit. And yeah, we can see how that's playing out. It's not really been met with great things. But I just think, again, like we need to keep these sort of conversations in perspective. It has served America to also have an imbalance in tariffs. It's been in their favor, let's put it that way. So let's not feel too sorry for the United States. Like no one's taking advantage of the United States, right? But I think that we are at this, all of these things that are happening. Like I was saying earlier, I wonder if Trump is even aware that like his actions and his decisions are all playing a part in this crossroad, this pivot of structural reform in global finance. So yeah, we're looking at long-term policy changes, probably impacting Bitcoin, banking, and digital assets, and just ending outdated financial models. Pisces dissolves what no longer serves. So institutions being pushed towards alignment with decentralized or humanitarian values. This is also a hallmark of Pisces. So it's really a defining chapter for Bitcoin. Saturn, representing the old guard, meets the North Node of representing the future, in a sign aligned with Bitcoin's ethos of borderless, intuitive, fluid, ideals. So Bitcoin may gain recognition as a legitimate long-term asset class, may be drawn into new legal frameworks or government agreements, but also face pressure to mature. Like there definitely will be an attempt to push for greater transparency, KYC, all of those kind of things. Sustainability, compliance will become focal points. So Bitcoin's price may build steadily, especially as it aligns with Saturn's values of discipline and consistency and trustworthiness. Like this isn't some crazy shitcoin that we're talking about. Bitcoin absolutely aligns to those values. So Saturn conjunct the North Node in Pisces is a really profound alignment, a cosmic checkpoint where we collectively decide what kind of financial future we want to build. And for Bitcoin, this marks the start of serious long-haul legitimacy. So it's not about like just explosive short-term gains, but it's about durability, respectability, and the integration of visionary ideals into tangible frameworks. So This is really the moment to trade with intention, to invest with wisdom, and to align your financial future with global transformation that's quietly underway. So we see the big headlines about tariffs, and we've obviously seen the effect that that's had on markets. But really, what's going on is behind the scenes, there is a complete transformation of our entire financial system. And Bitcoin is definitely part of that, maybe reluctantly part of it, but there is a lot of other things that's being underwritten within our system as well at the same time. Our next aspect is on the 23rd of April, where Venus conjoins the North Node in Pisces. So Venus rules money, value, beauty, attraction, luxury, and relationships, which we've already discussed. And of course, in financial markets, it is market sentiment, currency trends, and capital flow. So the North Node, as we just spoke about, represents the collective evolutionary path forward, so our destined growth direction. So this conjunction is a powerful alignment where it fuses Venus's energy with the momentum of the future. So again, in Pisces, it becomes especially mystical and meaningful, with that Pisces governing idealism, compassion, collective dreams, intuition, and spiritual value rather than materialism. Like, is this, with these North nodes in Pisces, these kind of aspects of, is there going to be a rewriting of the American dream? I think that that's also kind of going to be on the table at this point in time as well. So we'll see this Pisces energy often brings like emerging trends, imaginative financial tools, and like the rise of borderless value systems like Bitcoin. So Venus in the North Node signals a fated financial turning point again. Values are shifting. The other transit was more about like structure, and this is about values. So the values are also shifting. The structure is shifting, the values are shifting. So the values are shifting from material to spiritual collectively, from ownership to access, from centralized banking to decentralized finance. So expect themes like ethical investing, spiritual or cause-driven spending, and renewed interest in digital assets aligned with idealism, like Bitcoin's mission of disrupting central banking. That, I think, is going to become a big narrative again. So Venus in Pisces really resonates with Bitcoin's archetypes, like non-material, borderless, and value by belief. Again, as I spoke about before, all of these things, we as human beings and as society, collective consciousness, we run on narratives. Everything is just an idea that we all decide to get behind. And so, that's a really interesting concept when you apply it to Bitcoin. So this transit may boost public sentiment towards Bitcoin as a visionary store of value. It might trigger surges in socially driven investing and encourage greater mainstream investment, especially from spiritually or ethically motivated investors. So price could swell on optimism, hope, or collective euphoria. But also, again, just remember, Pisces can also create illusion. So clarity is really key. This Venus conjunct in the North Node in Pisces really invites a higher dimensional approach to money. And this is a transit of destiny, of aligned value creation, not just portfolios, but also in purpose. So for Bitcoin, this is a celestial kind of like nudge that reaffirms its long-term path as a value system that transcends borders, governments, and fiat control. So, sorry, central banks, but we're leaving you behind. And so this is really a time where you want to ask, where do my financial choices align with my soul's path? So Bitcoin may not just rise in price, it may also rise in perception, meaning, and purpose. So another really interesting transit, especially when you consider what what is going on in the macro environment. So on the 24th, we have Venus conjoin Saturn. So this conjunction is an intense merging of energies. So when Venus meets Saturn, love meets limits and value meets accountability. So this transit can feel a little sobering, but it's also like incredibly stabilizing and maturing when navigated consciously. So potentially expect tightening of liquidity and cautious sentiment, or at least like the threat of, like that's definitely a topic of conversation. Like, is Powell going to do anything? Is he going to intervene? And this transit might indicate that at least he's going to say he's not going to. So expect a kind of bit of a cooling effect on the markets. Investors become risk averse, preferring sort of more conservative long-term plays over speculative moves. Volatility kind of declines temporarily, with markets just sort of pausing to reassess real value. We have increased regulatory talk or policy pressures. So Venus-Saturn transits often coincide with news about financial regulations, particularly in like crypto or banking. So I don't know, the FDIC going to come out and say people are no longer insured? I'm just kidding. I'm not saying that they would do that, but do you know what I'm saying? Like there'll be some kind of announcement. It may mark a pivotal point for government intervention, taxation, or institutional insight of markets. Maybe Trump is going to announce that he's abolishing income tax. Let's see. There's a focus on sustainable wealth, so investors turn towards assets with long-term value, like Bitcoin, gold, blue chip stocks, and income-producing instruments. So market sentiment may shift towards quality over quantity during this time. Like substance is definitely favored over hype. This transit kind of teaches us to invest with integrity, spend responsibly, and value what truly lasts. So while it may bring short-term contractions or dips, especially in speculative markets, it ultimately lays a strong foundation for future gains. So for Bitcoin, this transit may momentarily mute excitement, but it also supports its evolution into, a respected long-term asset, especially in the eyes of like institutions and nation states. So this aspect really sort of begins the slowing down of upward momentum as we start to head into the new moon. So on the 26th of April, we have Mars in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius. So I would describe this as power struggles, volatility, and hidden forces. So that's what's kind of being outlined by this aspect, and it's a macro aspect. It's not necessarily specific to Bitcoin. In fact, I think it's more to do with the macro markets, the broader traditional finance markets, and governments. So again, we've got Mars, action, aggression, risk, war, initiative. And then we have Pluto, which is transformation, hidden power, destruction, and rebirth. Very much associated with deep money, institutional power, and macro shifts. So an opposition is a tension between these two forces, pulling in opposite directions, and it creates pressure, polarization, and often sudden kind of climaxes. So this aspect often aligns with sudden forceful moves in markets, driven by these conflicting agendas. So think retail versus institutions, regulators versus crypto, investor panic versus accumulation, US versus China, or US versus Iran. I think that those are sort of going to be quite pivotal things to watch. It can definitely indicate manipulative moves behind the scenes. Whales, governments, or market makers can definitely trigger shakeouts or fakeouts during this time. We probably will also see aggressive capital flows. So Mars in Leo expresses as bold, flashy, confident, risk-taking, representing like retail excitement, FOMO, or speculative bullishness, while Pluto in Aquarius brings in deep systemic forces, very much tied to technology, AI, innovation, and global power structures. So institutions may be stealthily asserting control over digital markets. May also see some announcements around CBDCs as well during this time. You could expect some sharp price swings, often involving like false breakouts or breakdowns, followed by a violent reversal. So expect like liquidity grabs, very common during these transits. And, Pluto flushes out weak hands before a major accumulation. So this can signal a local top or local bottom, especially if price action aligns with key psychological or technical levels. Now, the fact that we're coming into a new moon would symbolize like a local top for me from this perspective. So possible spike scenario might be Mars in Leo brings bold buyer energy. So like temporary rallies can be fueled by hype or news, like fake breakouts, to, lure in retail into a position. Or like potential price drop where if Pluto crashes like over leveraged positions, these oppositional forces from institutions may trigger stop hunts or major dumps or something like that. So major news may cause some fear-based selling as well. So Bitcoin's behavior will really depend on how much speculative excess is in the market. So that's why I pointed out those liquidation levels for you. And if the market is overheated, Pluto will cleanse it. If it's already been consolidating, which we kind of have, then Mars may push a break before Pluto transforms the structure. So this is really not a business as usual time. It's actually a test of emotional resilience, strategic clarity, and power awareness. Then our final transit we have on the 26th of April, Uranus sextile Bitcoin's natal Mercury. So we have this innovation, disruption, and sudden change from Uranus. So Uranus governs technology, liberation, shocks, and evolution, so especially in digital realms. And in astrology, Uranus brings the unexpected, often like catalyzing breakthroughs or shakeouts that realign systems to the future. And then we have Mercury, Bitcoin's natal Mercury. So really that represents like communication, data flow, market sentiment. And it also, in a natal chart, it rules information exchange, network systems, market messaging, and transaction speed and trader psychology. So in Bitcoin's chart, it's kind of representing how the Bitcoin protocol communicates, how the market reacts to data and news, and the flow of trading decisions. So it is a sextile, so it's opportunity, ease, and subtle activation. So it is a harmonious aspect representing openings and potential, especially when effort is applied. So Uranus sextile Bitcoin's natal Mercury is an opportunity transit, opening the door to market-altering innovations, fast-moving news cycles, and increased digital momentum. So I think that those shifts are probably going to push us into that new moon energy where we will see a bit of a slowdown and a bit of a reversal. But we shall see, and we will get into that when we get there. So really the theme of this time is to act with discipline, observe with detachment, and don't let drama drive your decisions. So as I said earlier, when looking at the charts, I'm kind of really looking at Bitcoin to pull back into those key levels, those liquidation levels, and pick up that cash that's sitting there for them. And then I'm wanting to be looking for my reversal that's going to bring me up into the next phase of this bull run. So let's keep a lookout for that. Look, also, when we are taking those entries, if we do see a reversal, it's fine. Like if they turn into short-term trades, take the profits and, be very emotionless about it. Like each trade that you enter doesn't need to be the next one that's going to go into the next cycle. It will turn into that if it's going to. So you want to just be taking those. If they only end up being short-term trades, no problems. We take the profit and then get aligned to and prepared for the next entry that could take us into that next leg. So I hope that that was clear. I hope that you enjoyed that. We have some really interesting astrology. We live in just such interesting times. Like it's just wild, the things that we are getting to witness and to be a part of. So it really is a privilege and an honor to be incarnated at this time and part of this huge shift in the collective consciousness in every aspect of our lives, honestly. So keep that in mind and be grateful, align to that, and leave some space for that as well. And until the new moon, I will see you then. Peace, love, and Bitcoin.